Hello everyone, my name is Chandler and I am the designer for Little Mermaid. And today I'm going to be teaching you how to make kelp. Now we're going to be making a coffee filter kelp, or kelp out of coffee filters. And we're going to use it as scenic decoration for the theater. Essentially, this is a small one, but we are going to make this today. And I'm going to teach you the entire process from A to Z to get us to making this. Now, this is a short one. Our goal is actually making 6 foot to maybe even 9 or 12 foot pieces. But I'm gonna give you everything you need to know, and it's gonna be really simple. So stay tuned and enjoy. Here we have the 8 items that you are going to need in order to make your kelp. The first, we have some coffee filters. Going down, we have fishing line, some teal dye. We have a cookie sheet, a plastic dish. This one's already stained because we've already made some kelp. And then I have a pair of tongs, some paper towels, and needles. Together, all of these are going to be making our kelp. Step 1, we are just going to prepare the surface that we are going to be using to dye the kelp on. All I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a cookie sheet and I'm gonna double the length of these paper towels. And I'm just going to simply lay it on the cookie sheet as a drying surface. Another thing you could do is you could lay aluminum foil on the bottom of it and then lay a piece of paper towel on top. But this is really just going to be a resting place for your kelp. You could do 1 of these, you could do 6 of these, you could do 37 of these. It doesn't really matter. But essentially what we're going to begin with is just doing aluminum foil, or you could just do the metal cookie sheet and then some paper towel. What we have here is we have our Tupperware dish. I've gone ahead and put probably like 6 to 8 cups of water in here. Really the amount of water, you don't really need to use a ton. I mean, if you're gonna be dyeing a bunch, maybe use a little bit more. In this case, I just have about probably 6 to 8 cups of water. And then I've got my teal dye. So with this one, I don't need to add too much because I want the kelp to actually be a lighter color. Even this little bit is probably gonna make them pretty blue. So a little goes a long way with this. So for this first part, we're just gonna make the color of the dye, and then we will move along to the next step. So the first thing we wanna do is we wanna take just some of our coffee filters. I go ahead and I kind of flatten them out like this. And this is probably maybe 5 to 6 coffee filters right here. So really all I'm gonna do is as simple as this. I'm just going to take these and drop them right into the water. And you can see it's like already starting to travel up the coffee filter. I'm just gonna give it a quick press down, and then all I do is I take these and I simply pick it up and I let some of that excess water drain off. And as you can see, it's a pretty nice blue color on there. So I just kind of shake it to give it a little bit of a dry, and then I'm gonna just move it over to the drying rack. That simple. I do that, I can take a few more. So with the drying process, we are actually going to utilize our oven. Now, please don't be alarmed. We are not going to be baking these at an insane heat. We actually will not even be baking it on this tray. What we are going to do instead is I have the oven set to right at 200 degrees. You could set it lower if you want to. I've moved it up to like 220. That also works fine. But basically what we're gonna do is we're going to slow dry these. If we were to leave these out on the counter like this, it would take a very long time in order to dry these kelp. So we're going to utilize the oven to help us out. So just be careful, keep a good eye on them. They'll be perfectly fine. No, they're not gonna catch on fire. Just be watchful. Don't go anywhere. Yeah, so I'm gonna put them right in the oven. And I'm setting these right on the rack. So I don't need to worry about kind of putting them anywhere like else. They don't really need to go on a sheet. The rack is a great place because it gives them air underneath, so that way that the heat and the air in the oven can kind of circulate around it. So I really just set them right on the rack. I just kind of toss them in as if it was like a little tortilla. And then I close the oven. You can set a timer for 5 minutes if you want to. They usually take about 8 to 10, but you can always just keep a good eye and check on the thing, and they'll be good to go. All right, so you have finished drying all of your kelp in the oven, and now we have been left with these crispy blue flat pieces of kelp. How delightful. Nothing got caught on fire, hopefully. If you follow those instructions, you should be perfectly fine. So let's move on. The next portion, we are going to start sewing all of these kelp together. First thing we're going to do is we are going to take our needle. Now, I use pretty big needles for this project just because I'm using a thicker fishing line. You can see that, that's a pretty big needle. And so I just also want to be able to hold it carefully, and I wanted to be able to make sure I could thread the fishing line through the needle. I didn't want to deal with the hassle of not being able to do that. So I used a big needle. So we're going to take our fishing line, which is, hard to see on camera. But we're going to take our fishing line, I kind of double it in half. So I take a big piece and then I just fold it over like this. I forgot that you were also going to need a pair of scissors. So pause the video, go find a pair of scissors. You're gonna need them to cut the line. Oop. So I cut the fishing line, and then I'm, like I said, going to thread this needle, which is quite simple. See, it's done. I don't wanna waste any time worrying about threading the needle. Now, what I'm going to do, especially with this needle, because it's thicker, I'm going to need to make sure that my knot is extremely thick, because when you pass it through this paper, if it's a little knot, it's not going to hold. So we're going to actually take a little bit to make a pretty thick knot with this. And really you kind of can't go wrong. So in this instance, the thicker the better. So I have one, and then I'm going to just kind of do this a couple times. Get it through. I forgot how to tie. Yeah, we're just gonna tie our knots, and once we have our knots, then we are good to start sewing. So what I do first is I just take, you really only need to do 3 or 4 at a time. You don't want to take a bunch because you want them to layer, and they will fall. So right now I've got about 4. I'm gonna actually go ahead and crinkle them up just a little bit beforehand. And as simple as it is, I'm gonna go right into the center and pierce right through and pull this through. Now the hardest part is honestly making sure that you pull this through without tearing these. So the way to do that is you simply take your fingers and pull it taut like that. And then I use my other finger to kind of push them through. So like that, it pulls through. Then I just pull and the kelp will fall right onto the end of the knot. So now what I want to do is I want to leave another knot for these to fall onto. So as soon as I pulled through once with the 4, I'm actually going to take this and tie a knot around the bottom, which actually is pretty simple. You just kind of pull. Now, normally you would think that you would want a knot to be pretty tight. However, I have learned after doing this that it's better to leave a pretty big knot tie, because the kelp are not going to fall off of it. You don't want all the kelp when it's done to slide down, so you don't actually have to pull this knot as tight as you think you do. You can leave it pretty loose and open, and it will hold. So after you've done that, we're going to pull a few more kelp from our pile, give them a good crunkle, and then we're going to pierce through again. Like I said, again, we're going to pull that taut so we can pull it through. We give it a little push and pull at the same time. We've pierced it through. Whoop, and then we drop it. Again, we're going to make another tie. And we're going to do another knot. Again, it's kind of important that we don't, remember that we do a thicker knot. We don't want to pull it all the way closed. And again, just like so. So then we're going to grab 3 or 4 more pieces, do another crinkle, pierce, pull that taut again. and same old, and then it just keeps going. And so then you just keep sewing and sewing like so. Make a crinkle. Then pull through. I'm going to take our last little bits. Here's some. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take and make one last knot. Okay, so we have tied all of these together. And now, if you were to go and hold up from this end, you can see it is starting to form some kelp. So it is now hanging. Okay, so we just finished doing our first stitches of the kelp. We have this little guy right here. Now what we can do is you can go in after it's all formed and you can just kind of scrunch it more, and it starts to give it some really cool texture. And then when they're all strung together, it essentially looks like a really tall piece of kelp. So I have made some earlier that what we're gonna do is we are going to have so much kelp. So you can see I have this piece right here. It's kind of long. They're all flat because they didn't really crinkle them yet. But essentially, the trick to getting a whole big strand of kelp is we're actually gonna make several small sections, and then you simply stitch them together. So we have this short piece. All I have to do is take this needle, and I literally can just pull it through the knot of this other one, and it is already stitched together. And so essentially I just pull it taut, make a knot, and you're good to go. In the final portion of this, all you have to do is just fluff the kelp, which really you don't have to worry about too much, because I, as a designer, am probably gonna come in and I'm gonna mess with it about 50 million different times. But essentially, all you have to do is you can just go into like small sections. You can kind of pull them apart, kind of like you would fluff a Christmas tree. And you just start to give it some more of that texture. By crinkling it a little bit. And really you kind of can't mess it up. Just don't pull it apart. That would be a little detrimental. But yeah, essentially that is the beginning process of making kelp. So after I made a strand that would be about this long, I would then make another one, again, stitch it together until I have 6-foot piece, 9-foot piece, 12-foot piece, however long. And the best part is travel is really easy because they just crunch together. And so they actually fold up pretty nicely. But yeah, if you want to hang them in your house, I always recommend maybe looping it on a hanger, and then that way you can just like hang it up to get it out of your way when you're not wanting to work on it. But other than that, that is how we make our kelp.